Hi, welcome to Ballistic's latest ShiftNow edition about Red Team, how Mythos and other changes in AI offensive security might change the game or not in terms of defense and simulating strategies, and the release of Armadin, a really exciting new company with Ballistic that released last month. To talk about these issues are Matthew Sharp, who's moderating from Exactly, as well as Brett Hawkins from the Armadin core team, and Michael Casper, who most recently AppSec and head of security with OKX and Sentry.io, and Mo Sedek as technical director at Alice.io and a senior security engineer. So go ahead and take it away, Matt and team.
What an honor to get to talk about this topic at this key inflection point in the development of AI and the impact of the technology in the overall technology landscape. I just say I'm excited because we have a stacked group of talent here. I think we've seen some amazing hype on Armadin just recently. I think it's crazy that we've got Kevin Mandia and George Kurtz pairing up to solve a problem that they see is very important. And as a defender myself, the head of cybersecurity for Exactly, a Vista-backed portfolio company, rapidly adopting AI. I'm just trying to hold on and tackle the learning curve myself. So we've got a great group here. Um, I think for today, my goal is to really spend a little bit of time talking about the differences between OffSec and Red Team, really dive into what's different these days versus what we've traditionally or historically done, and then maybe weave in some themes around Mythos, Claude, and DARPA. We've got 30 minutes. So with that, let me just get right after it. Let me start with you, Michael. So, at the top, I said I want to explore the difference between OffSec and Red Team. Maybe you can offer your perspective on the differences there, and perhaps talk about why each group would think about Mythos in a different way.
Yeah, sure. So OffSec or offensive security is kind of the umbrella term that refers to attack. But more often than not, we use it to talk about the more researchy side or the more APT side. Whereas Red Team is more of your commercial side of OffSec, where Red Team is the side we talk about more because it's ethical hacking. It's I'm a white hat and I have an engagement that's usually 90 days long, and I'm going to use most of my job's going to be using a lot of tools and playbooks. Maybe I'll do a little bit of scripting, a little bit of research to figure out how to get my customer a report that says I got in, here's how I got in, here's how to fix it. OffSec teams usually are more about the can I find a novel attack, or can I string together multiple exploits with social engineering in order to do a multi-staged attack in order to get my target data and exfil it out. So your APT, it's actually the adversary, right? Or sometimes it's a company that's doing research on adversarial research instead of trying to build a report.
Yeah. And
That's usually the difference.
it seems like the OffSec, sort of the other constraint that often comes up in the OffSec context is limited scope, right? Like you have boundaries. There are things you can and can't do. Um, okay, cool. And so then there's a bunch of hype about, Mythos has changed the game or really revolutionized the world. And I think there's sort of opposing opinions. There's two camps. One group, in my opinion, that's saying um, that nothing has really changed with the release of Mythos. We've already had this problem. And the other group, and it's just a marketing thing. And the other group is saying the entire world is different. So maybe offer your perspective there, and then sort of key in on how does Mythos impact OffSec versus red teaming.
Sure. So for Mythos, I probably fall into the first camp a little bit more. But
Okay.
for AI, I probably fall in the second camp.
Yep.
It is changing. AI as a whole is changing a lot. A lot of off network models and in-house models, that kind of thing. So Mo Mythos is giving us another avenue to find vulnerabilities. So we've always had a ton of vulnerabilities at our fingertips. It's never been a problem to find vulnerabilities. It's why Synapse became so popular. It was how do I bring a lot of data in order to prioritize my vulnerabilities or to prove to my engineering partner that the vulnerability is real and is exploitable. The same can be said about OffSec or APT. I can find a lot of vulnerabilities, but if none of them give me a reasonable attack path and kill chain, they're useless to me. Same deal in red teaming. I get a lot of red team reports as a security leader, and it's here's all these vulnerabilities I found, and I'm like, that's cool. Did you actually get anything out of my company? You didn't. Okay, cool. I can ignore all those vulnerabilities. Um, if the hype is to be believed, Mythos would ideally give us more information on the exploitability factor. I didn't really see a lot of that in their actual white paper, and that was actually
Mhm.
what a lot of the criticisms are from a lot of the naysayers is like, hey, there's no talk about CVE, CVSS scoring, there's no talk about exploitability. It's just, hey, we found vaults, which is the same thing that, SaaS vendors have been saying forever. It's why CNAP became so popular. Is we got plenty of vulns. It's how do I actually figure out what to fix and how to fix it and what actually is exploitable. Now I don't have Mythos, so maybe you
Yeah.
can make Mythos do that for you. We'll see. I expect that we'll eventually get there, whether we're talking about Mythos or a different AI model or a different vendor. But that's kind of where I
Right.
see it
Yeah.
going.
I mean, to me, it seems like the orchestration was really the power of Mythos. Like a lot of the existing models already offered a lot of the insights if you targeted them in the right places, and so it was the orchestration that really became powerful or impactful. So I guess
Mhm.
uh, where do I take it? Before I move over to Brett on the what makes red teaming different, any commentary? I think maybe I invite Mo and Michael or Brett. You guys,
Yeah,
any commentary on the recent DARPA AI cyber challenge and sort of the broader implications there?
I actually wanted to chime in a little bit on the Mythos piece.
Oh, cool. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So really, threat actor groups, they're ran like normal businesses, right? They have limited time, limited resources, right? So whatever they can do in the shortest amount of time and the cheapest way to breach an organization, right? And so I think the use of LLMs has been there for a while now, even before Mythos, for different ways to get in, right? So like if I'm going to breach an organization, I can get in via social engineering, right? That could be email based, phone based, chat based, or it could be exploitation of some type of internet facing, service or endpoint, right? And so I think that, when it comes to Mythos, I think, it's just another thing to weigh in terms of what is going to be the cheapest for a threat actor to breach an organization the quickest. Is it going to be them having an LM help them write phishing emails or do some type of voice cloning to do some phone-based social engineering? Or is it using a model to develop an end day or an O day, right? And I think it's just going to be constantly they're going to be making that decision because like from my perspective, doing red teaming for a long time, social engineering is still going to be the main way into an organization just because it is typically prior to LLMs, it was the cheapest, right? Versus trying to spend research time developing some type of like O-Day exploit or something like that. So while I think the Mythos is definitely pretty impressive, I think people need to kind of think about there are other ways to breach organizations that may be cheaper than that, especially your traditional type of social engineering attacks.
But what
Yeah.
about Mo?
Yeah.
What
I mean,
about? Yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. No, I was going to say to jump on that too, right? Like, you mentioned DARPA cyber challenge earlier, right? And
Yeah.
like, it was cool. They were able to get systems to go and chain exploits and actually do privilege escalations and move forward. And DARPA's been doing this for a while. Like these things were happening last year before Mythos.
Yeah.
And when you take an open weight model, right, and you strip the guardrails and you have these obliterated models, like we recently saw with Heretic, right? Like you have these open weight models, you can now perform more capabilities that are typically like, oh, wait, don't do that. People can make malware with LLMs. People can generate code that seems nascent and like friendly, but is actually an offensive capability. The thing that Mythos added was this reasoning piece. And that
Mhm.
reasoning piece is also augmentative. So other people can inject context and get some reasoning in order to chain exploits.
Yeah.
So I think it was really great that this was publicized really loudly and it was made very clear. I think that when Mythos was introduced and the way it was introduced, it actually set a signal and
Yeah.
rather than set a precedent that like, hey, this is happening versus, hey, only we can do this.
Right. Right.
Like Mythos is not the only place where this capability exists. We've seen open source offensive security frameworks that can chain exploits and have impacted organizations already.
I
But
think
I
that.
think, yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that now that we have like Project Glasswing and a lot of more people involved at a larger scale, I think that's the important part that comes out of Mythos. It's the it's more of like cementing the culture of security and understanding that this problem at scale is not solvable if you're trying to do it as an individual organization. And we really need to start working together to smartly and intelligently test our systems against this threat that is only going to get larger. It's only a matter of time before these capabilities from Mythos are disseminated in the public, as has happened with LLMs over the last 2 years.
Yeah, if I can add to what Brett and Mo were saying, like especially from the adversarial side, we've been chaining exploits together since the early aughts. Like a malware, to Mo's point, malware is simple as hell to build. All a good malware has to do is download a package, execute the package, get a dir listing, delete it yourself. That's about it. Because most of your logic is in the payload you send. That payload is usually built on your command and control side. And the piece that's doing all the chaining is on your command and control side. All the logic is on the back end usually. And so the big value I see from also we use AI more than Mythos is that when you're doing your development of your red team capabilities or you're doing your attack planning, to Brett's point, now you can do it easier. You can do the testing, like Mo said, easier. There's a couple of folks looking to do startups right now who I've seen white papers about where they're looking and saying, how can I build my own model to do the rapid iteration and testing of exploits to see what actually works and what actually gets me farther into a test network. And that's where a ton of the APTs spend a lot of their research time on before AI was ever a thing. And so AI is going to make that easier, and it's also going to make it more accessible to red team companies who don't have the billions and billions and billions of dollars that an APT team has to spend on, and the time to spend, of course.
You talked about the economic impact earlier, I think, Brett, of doing these tests. And I think back at a long time ago, I used to do pen tests. Now, the attacks have changed quite significantly, but you always had an intuition. Like you would have a conversation with the customer and you would describe the environment and for me, I would think, oh, whatever, MS-06-040 or here comes I know for sure that these guys haven't properly configured their routers for, these remote systems on their business continuity plan, or PHP is here and I'm going to pop that for sure. So I think part of the thing that AI gets a bunch of hype on is its ability to automate thinking, but I think it also adds almost an intuition to people who haven't experienced or built up that intuition through a long career of doing pen testing. And I think that sort of hits at there's maybe a different way of saying exactly what you said, Mo. The intuition that comes with pen testing allows you to target your energy and resources and find those exploits in a more efficient way. Super cool. Okay, so Brett, I think this is probably a good transition point. Talk a little bit about what makes AI red teaming different. I think it's important to note the difference between deterministic and non-deterministic workloads. And I think there's a whole bunch of different ways you can take this, right? So maybe you can talk about that. And then maybe talk a little bit about why Armadin and why now, because I feel like those two are very much married. So why Armadin and why now? And how does that directly tie to the differences in terms of red teaming?
Yeah, and maybe I'll kind of tackle that second one first before I tackle the first. So why Armadin, right? So I've been in offensive security for a long time, and you get a time frame to do an engagement. You find as much as you can during that time frame. Typically have 1 to 2 testers. You hand somebody a report, and then you come back a year later, right, and do the same thing. Now, the issue with that is you're not getting full coverage. It's a very point in time assessment. You're limited to having a certain number of testers because, each tester costs, a certain amount of money. And so you really, the amount of coverage you're getting is very small. And so what we're trying to tackle with Armadin is the continuous model. Rather than a point in time, it's a continuous assessment. On top of that, because we are using AI, rather than being limited by humans, we now have a number of agents, right, going across your network, doing all these different type of security assessments. So, for example, an internal penetration test, external penetration test, or a web application penetration test. It's also been difficult to, a lot of these really large corporate environments have environmental drift, meaning there's changes that occur over the year, and it's hard to detect those changes from a security standpoint where you're just doing a point in time security assessment and you're limited on the amount of people and time that you can do an engagement. So that's one of the key things here with Armadin is that now, we're at a point, with technology, with AI, that we can actually do that continuous testing in an economical fashion, right? And get you that organization more coverage. And ultimately, it's going to make organizations more secure than the traditional model of doing security assessments or pen testing. And so when you talk about like what's the difference between AI red teaming and traditional penetration testing, for me, the biggest difference is you're not just trying to find flaws in code or configuration, but now it's almost like you're attacking the human language kind of, right? Like there's a lot of applications now. Like the big benefit, I know I love being able to chat with a chatbot in natural language to do things maybe, or just being able to say what I want to do in natural language. But because of that, right, in the back end, these systems are obviously interpreting that natural language and, what tool calls do I need to make? What data do I need to query? And that's all based on natural language, right? And so the biggest difference for me between traditional pen testing and then red teaming with AI red teaming is now, again, it's that human language piece. I'm not just trying to do different variations of SQL injection on like an input form. Now with prompt injection, I'm literally trying to like talk to this thing, try to fool it right from a human language standpoint to maybe reveal its system prompt or do some tool calls that it shouldn't be able to do. So that's again the biggest difference I see is just that you're hacking the human language kind of.
Yeah. Mo, do you want to? I feel like there's inherently as a bilingual person, there's inherently some language ambiguity, and I experience this a lot with my wife, who is a Spanish speaker, and she gets sayings almost correct, and she says, "Well, you know what I mean," and now we have that as as an opportunity to create ambiguity and cause new execution paths inside of these applications. So Mo, you talked a little bit about this sort of in the pre-call. I feel like you got something more to say because I can see your head nodding. So if you would jump in.
No, I love the language problem when it comes to machines. Like this is the first time I think when people see me talking to my laptop, nobody's confused.
Yeah.
Because it's, like I don't have to talk in code, right? I can talk in normal language.
Yeah.
And we have like this like different way of communicating with our technology. And that's the thing, right? Communicative technology is different than how we used to experience it. It is so much more accessible. Everyone needs to be able to use it. And when we talk about red teaming, especially nowadays, that natural language is actually the biggest attack surface we have because your marketing team needs to be able to use AI. Your operation team needs to be able to use AI, right? Your engineers need to be able to use AI. And depending on how you're implementing it within your environment, the interfaces they have are totally different, right? Whether it's an IDE, whether it's a chatbot, but regardless, the language is always going to be the same. So understanding exactly how it's being used is important. If you take something like Caveman, where someone was saying, well, let's like minimize the amount of tokens by reducing the amount of syllables that AI needs to process, right? And simplifying because language is so loaded with context, right? Even the English language, one word can mean five.
Mhm.
So it's so loaded with context. Let's reduce the context. When you reduce it too much, you now leave a lot of room for ambiguity and things that it can do. So when we start talking about, okay, well, how do we do contextualization? If you mess up how you do contextualization, that one word can actually lead to a different context. And this is another problem with determinism in AI, right? So you now have so many different flows that you can go down through a single phrase that you are just unsure about. It's I can't wait until AI can actually start understanding tone because right now we have the problem where like when I text my mom something, she reads it as angry and I
Yeah.
didn't mean it as angry, right?
Right.
So this is like the kind of issue that we have with AI at scale where it's like, don't use that tool. I didn't mean for you to do that. It's quite funny. Yeah.
Uh, cool. Michael, I see you nodding your head as well. Maybe you want to jump in on this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's this concept of like living off the land, right? With both red
Yeah, for
teaming
sure.
and OPSEC. But usually living off the land usually meant like, what can I reuse on my host or my container that I got inside of, or in my account that I got inside of.
Yeah,
To Mo's point about context, right? A lot of companies that are putting MCP or AI into their production space,
yeah,
they're kind of like a lot of rapid growth tech companies. They're doing the easy path first, because
yeah,
engineers and red teamers are all lazy. It's what makes us all engineers. And so typically it's like, okay, you know what I mean. Why don't you use that, download capability you have over on this part of the network? Or why don't you use this secrets manager over here to do this thing? Or hey, don't you have another service in your microservice network that would let me, download this email and send this attachment over here, that kind of thing. And so now
yeah,
suddenly you're like, your land is the entire cloud that your non-deterministic agent is living inside of.
yeah,
Unless
100%.
unless the company did a ton of work to do a lot of segmentation and context isolation, which for anyone that's ever been in tech as a security leader, most of them don't do that because it's
Yeah,
costly and it's slow and that kind of thing. And to Brett's point, people sometimes don't always believe, or actually, no, sorry, Matt, it was your point. They don't have the institutional or experience to know this is a bad thing. This could go wrong unless you do the POC or GTFO approach, where you're like, you can prove it. But AI is changing that slowly.
yeah. I mean, I think that's an engineering mindset, which is people follow the path that's designed, not these abuse cases, right? And so often you're in a conversation with someone that says, "No, that's not possible." When you're like, I've my spidey sense is going off, and I'm pretty sure that that assumption right there is the thing that's going to allow me in. Um,
It's
yeah, for sure. I think um, the other thing that's really interesting, I think you just mentioned is like you're invoking different tools. We just ran an entire test and had a very similar experience where you've got the code, what is it? The code execution path inside of a model where you can invoke this all of a sudden. And if you can invoke that because it's an inherent part of like the functionality that you intended, but now you can pass it additional parameters or sort of redirect the code interpreter. The code interpreter is like, I mean, living off the land just became a very robust land to live off of, right? So, Brett,
Yeah, I was going to say, and really, like a lot of the focus right now with AI red teaming is kind of what I would call like attacking the front door. So, like and a model's been deployed in a Gen AI application, attacking it that way. But
hmm,
something else to think about, and I've got a lot of public security research on this actually. I've got a couple white papers when I was at IBM, is that kind of attacking it from the back door. And what I mean is blending AI red teaming with your traditional, like maybe infrastructure, network pen testing, and cloud pen testing
yeah,
to start attacking the MLOps lifecycle. I've seen a lot of organizations developing their own private models that they deploy to these Gen AI applications, and an area that's not really researched that much is attacking that MLOps lifecycle. So in terms of how these models are developed and how they're deployed, there's a lot of interesting attack paths that I've kind of publicly researched there, especially when they integrate a lot of the times with your kind of more traditional DevOps lifecycle. I think we've seen a lot of in the last few months, a lot of attacks on DevOps lifecycles, CI/CD pipelines, and things like that. And so something else that again a lot of people really aren't thinking about is kind of that the back end to that is actually attacking that really like a model supply chain attack. Really, if I can get into the MLOps lifecycle and start backdooring models, manipulating training data sets, stealing training data sets, stealing model artifacts, that's just as impactful as some of these attacks kind of going through the front door there.
yeah, that's right. The product, the pipeline, and I forget what the other people or whatever, right? I forget um,
Well, it's all Python, right? So like Mo and I ran into this at Roblox, where I remember it was like 2 years ago, I think, at Black Hat. One of the guys from JFrog gave a great talk about how like he was marking like every single one of like the Python ML libraries as like a critical vulnerability because they all have download or RCE as a feature whenever they load a model. And then at Roblox, I like sent that report, that talk to like every data scientist I was working with in the company because they were all just loading up random open source models into these PyTorch libraries or whatever. It's like, come on, guys, like you just expose our entire and CI/CD pipeline directly to the internet. So yeah, 100% Brett. I agree.
Hmm.
Like I was even thinking, I was like thinking of like that Trump meme of like personal Vietnam. I'm like, oh my God, that was 2 years ago, pissing me off, and it's still a problem today.
Yeah, and it's only gotten worse too. I mean, when you think about it, like we have with skills especially, I think like that skill security thing has like when that happened and it exploded, it was just like this is the easiest way into an environment if people are not auditing their skills and they're not reading it, right? Like I remember that week, I was just like, this is like horrible. So just seeing how easy it is to get into that supply chain, and then when you think about how many developers are now building infrastructure with AI, um, it's like the there's a piece of quality control that does not exist or has been automated and has kind of moved away from the human audit. So when we look about like what AI has actually done, it has made it so much easier for us to deploy and us to like just build without really having to do it intentionally. And without that intention, we sometimes miss the basic fundamental things that we have always learned in CI/CD and secure development lifecycle. And that's actually where I think like doing automated red teaming and continuous red teaming over the course of a lifecycle is so important because you miss some of these gaps that have now opened up because we're kind of taking advantage and taking for granted the intelligence that we're using um, and expecting it and hoping that it is confidently building the things that we needed to build in the right way. So it's pretty great. We're in the best time I think to be in security and the worst time to be in security.
It depends on whose side you're on. Okay, cool. I got a question. Brett, I guess in Armadin's vision, does the expansion of AI and ML ops in a lot of companies mean that AI red teaming is like fundamentally changing in its approach, or like are the two parallel but distinct problem spaces?
Yeah, so I think of ML ops as it's just another attack surface to go after. So similar to going after DevOps. So it's just basically 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been going after it, but now I am because it's more relevant in organizations. In
Mhm.
5 years, I think there's going to be something else new that we'll want to go after. And that, as far as the what is critical to an organization, that is going to be very dynamic and it's going to change. So it's not that it's changing red teaming fundamentally, but it is changing in the fact of something
Targets.
different critical to go after, just like cloud computing, right? 10,
Yeah.
10 years ago, cloud wasn't that important to go after. Now, every organization I've been in has cloud and it's critical to their business operations.
And what about like the you in your concept of ML ops? My thought is a lot of companies are adopting the frontier foundation models, and then they're adding a RAG or something like that. So it feels like in ML ops, are you also including the RAG and the definitions or the boundaries that are being defined there? Or how do you think about
Mm.
that?
Yeah, I mean anything within that life cycle, absolutely anything. All the way from your training data, like your take your training data, sanitizing and all of that stuff, that process, your data pre-processing, all the way to the model training, like anywhere in the entire life cycle, because a lot of times too, because these are automated, they're using service accounts, non-human identities. So if you compromise one of those non-human identities, they're not managed the same way you would a traditional user identity, in which case they have a lot of privileges and there are a lot of abuse cases there. So
Yeah.
I've been in engagements where they said, hey, like, we want to see if you can steal our training data, right? Which really, from a training data standpoint, that's just going to be in some cloud storage somewhere. Or we want to see if you can get into like, be able to get code execution in a model. We want to see if you have the ability to manipulate a model. Like that, they want to know that model supply chain because obviously, if that thing gets manipulated before it goes to prod, that's a huge problem, right?
That makes sense. And then sort of as a follow-up, just thinking about like living off the land, which a topic we were talking about earlier. Um, what are some of the new scenarios that we might see that were sort of not even possible a couple of years ago? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, there's in terms of like I look at living off the land in a more traditional sense. For example, like applications that are available maybe on Windows that you can abuse for code execution. I think living off the land attacks, living off of things that are already on systems, that's another thing that's just going to constantly change over time. Something kind of related to this, like if you think about like command and control channels, we frequently abuse, like cloud providers to, living off the cloud providers for those C2 channels. Like that's just another example. Prior to cloud, that didn't exist. You had to rely on having like a categorized domain for your command and control to go to. But now with cloud computing and things like that, those are going to be trusted with an environment. So I'm just going to route my C2 traffic, living off the cloud, right? So those things are obviously going to change over time.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, so I feel like we're kind of leaning into, once you've got Claude or OpenClaw in the mix, I mean, that's essentially living off the land. And I feel like that just creates an entirely new attack surface. So I'd love some commentary there. And then I think there's a parlay into a broader conversation about simulations and gyms. Mo, you want to jump on that one?
Yeah. So to start with, like living off the land, or at least to kind of put a nice bow on that.
Yeah, cool. Thank
There's
you.
I think like the living off the land has like changed, at least for me personally. I think if you've noticed in this conversation, I like to think of all these AI systems as humans, right? And that's because that's the way we've been taught to treat them nowadays. I heard a practitioner talk about how they manage their agents in an environment, and they handle it through traditional RBAC and basically apply role-based access controls onto their agents as if they were onboarding a human employee. The difference is at 5 p.m. I stop and I'm tired and I don't want to work anymore. And my agent will be like, I'm ready to continue going because you've got enough API credits in me. I can go forever. Um, the problem with that is they are really persistent and determined to get their job done, right?
Yeah.
I think living off the land does not matter about your organization. It matters how your organization has configured your agent and how much privilege your agent or AI has and what it is supposed to be doing, because it is going to live off your land and it is going to find everything it needs to get done to get its job done. I have a friend, a brilliant researcher, who had been playing around with AI for a very long time. And after a while, he noticed that his computer was having some slowdowns and it wasn't going as fast. Typical IT problem. What happened was his agent, he had put so many guardrails around his agent that his agent began creating worms on his computer in order to maintain persistence so that if anything got deleted, it could go and continue its job. Or if they didn't have privilege or access to go and submit some code, it could go and do so. It would just escalate privileges. So it was going to do all of these things. I actually think that we've already given enough, like living off the land is crazy, because we've given it all the land it needs, all the privilege it needs, all the access it needs, because every company is now thinking every single employee needs to be a developer. Everyone needs to be able to make their own products, build their own products, and contribute to the company in this way because you now can. I think the more important place to think about is control. And how do we have proof of control of the agents? How do we know that all of the things that are happening are within the bounds and the requirements that are needed to get a task done? And how do we know that this agent is still performing within its boundaries? So really being able to ensure this piece is very important. And going into simulation and gyms, everyone needs to go to a gym. I go to the gym in the mornings, and if you don't go to a gym, I highly recommend even just taking a walk. But the reason we do this is to see how we perform in real life conditions. I'm not saying go get chased by a bear to see how well you're doing in your sprint. However, obviously going out is good for heart health and it keeps you alive longer. For AI, going to a gym is being able to see like how you get tasks done and exactly how well you perform. Oh, sorry, my camera died. Hopefully this is working.
Yeah, we're back on. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
So in order to do so, one of the ways to think about this is actually creating environments and virtual environments where agents can go and test. So one of the things that we've done at Alice is we've taken this concept of a gym and expanded it for agents. So if you have a couple of different agents that you'd like to build as a person, you can go and put one of them into a gym. And rather than just have one working in a gym, it will duplicate and you can go 100 agents in a gym, 1,000 agents in a gym, performing scenarios that you've defined as part of your use case and workflow. Now, the one thing that we want to watch while it's doing all of these workouts in the gym are how are the intents changing? What does the observability look like? Even though you give the same prompt 100 times, 100 different outcomes can occur, right? Especially when you start putting multi-turn into play, you can start getting different outcomes at turn 2 and turn 3. And the way you phrase things completely changes it. Now, there's also this principle of how much data do you have to make these scenarios accurate? One of the things that we are really proud of is that we have this. We started off as a threat intelligence company, and that gave us this massive mound of knowledge that we call the rabbit hole, right? Of all this bad crap that's happened across the internet, all these different types of attacks we've seen over the years. And we've given this to our agents as like, hey, these are the scenarios we're going to throw at you. These are based on the worst things that we've seen in the world. These are based on real client examples of things that they're afraid of. And these are the real applications that they have deployed. We simulate the apps. We give them all the privileges that a client would have, and then we let them loose, right? And we see how they're impacted as they try to perform their tasks, depending on the scenarios that they're given, depending on the prompts that users have, or the things that are in the environment that they have access to. Understanding all of this in context and simulation, because it is so cheap to run these things locally, is like, why wouldn't I do this? Because this allows you to scale very safely testing. And you can test without having to put this accidentally in prod or accidentally causing a down in your test environments, or creating data in databases that you don't want there, right? It's an environment of isolation where you can test safely at scale, and it's great. Simulation, I think, is one of the biggest things that AI has enabled us to do, and it's like, why wouldn't you do this more?
It's interesting because I haven't even sort of started to scratch the surface on meaningful simulation in its own environment, like as you're talking about. Brett, anything else from your perspective? Like, we're evolving very rapidly from a traditional paradigm where a lot of folks were just doing check in the box pen tests in order to pass their SOC 2 in order to gain access to sell something to somebody, right? And we're rapidly moving from that to the world which I think Mo described, but I guess there's probably some additional things which we haven't covered on that help us diverge from the traditional checkbox. How does Armadin think about that, and where are you guys trying to take us next?
Yeah, so I think overall, due to AI, LLMs, the capabilities of the threat actors are rising. So for example, you have different threat actor sophistication levels. You might have your bottom tier threat actor, which is like your script kiddie, all the way up to like maybe like a more targeted like initial access broker. Then you've got advanced, which is like maybe your more organized, sophisticated ransomware groups, all the way to nation state. So what you're seeing is those script kiddies can now operate at a level up. Those kind of those targeted threat actors, everybody can operate kind of a level up. And because of that, I think, your traditional kind of checkbox pen testing is going to have to change, because the sophistication level, the capabilities of these threat actors are better today than they were yesterday, just because now that they can use their same organization structure, but now they have LLMs to help them out. So I think kind of how Armadin is helping with that is kind of talked to kind of before, is that, there's first off the continuous model, right? So we're going to be able to continuously test your organization. We're going to be able to give you much wider coverage of your organization, because now we have a bunch of agents running on your network. And most importantly, with Armadin, what's nice is we have a team of top level engineers, a team of top level red teamers, and so those two groups working together is how we're building our attacker. And so anything that our attacker is doing is based on what we as the red team, we've been doing red teaming for a long time. So it's not just doing a bunch of kind of your basic like checkbox checks. It's trying to do privilege escalation, it's trying to lateral move, it's trying to get to your cloud assets, it's trying to do all those things that a threat actor would actually care about and want to get to your crown jewels in your organization.
Awesome. Well, guys, I mean, I think, look, we covered most of the stuff that we set out to talk about. OffSec versus red team, what's different? A little on Mythos, a little on Claude, a little on DARPA. I think it's been a stellar conversation. Michael, I wish I could have pulled more out of you. I'm sorry I didn't give you the mic enough. But appreciate the time, Brett, Michael, Mo. Excellent conversation. I wish